Hey everyone, this is Miss Saunders here, about to deliver your week 4 PowerPoint or lecture about some ideas that we've encountered in the readings this week. So one thing that we talked about this week is how to write, oh, I'm sorry, my phone is ringing, how to write adequate professional emails. So use a short and informative subject line that kind of saves the person on the other end of your email some time if they know what the email is about. It's just kind of a good protocol to have for writing emails in professional settings. You definitely want to copy people when it's necessary. That saves time, communicates necessary information. Something that we've been talking about throughout the semester, keep your message brief, write concisely. You might want to every so often when you're writing a sentence, look at the sentence you've written and ask yourself, is there any way that I can remove some words and retain the same meaning? And I'll tell you, I read a lot of writing where I feel that is the case, where I feel like words can be removed and the message would be the same. So always try to think about how you want to eliminate wordiness from your emails. So I'm going to get into like three, possible patterns for writing professional emails or letters. And some of the material I'm about to go into, it's material that was in a chapter in the text Writing for Business, which I did not have you read this chapter because there's a lot of review in the chapter that you read in Better Business Writing, but I'm just going to summarize some of the additional ideas that I got in the other text. So hopefully that's not confusing, but the basic message is that this is from the textbook that we've been reading, Writing for Business. So if this is unfamiliar to you, that's expected. So okay, so they have three possible options for emails. Of course, there might be other options, but saying yes in an email, saying no in an email, and saying maybe in an email. So when you're saying yes, you want to get straight to the point politely. You want to use as little words as possible. So again, this idea of writing concisely, and you might also want to, cement the agreeable relation. So express the pleasure involved in the reaction, or express some awareness and courtesy of the person to whom you're corresponding with. So when you're saying no in an email, which is a different, option, different route you might take, or you're delivering bad news, you want to definitely think of the other person's feelings and not your own. And that's kind of a good piece of general advice, is always kind of put yourself in your reader's shoes when you're drafting and creating correspondence. There are times when a hard and fast no is the best way to proceed, but not often. Instead, the preferred route is to kind of start slowly and establish common ground with your reader. You want to put your finger on the no factor, so you want to identify the negative factor in the situation as, your reason why you were saying no or why you were delivering the bad news. But in general, you want to try to translate these negative aspects into positive ones whenever you can genuinely find a positive aspect. Of course, you want to be aware of not to be superficial or misleading, so be genuine, but it's a good piece of advice to kind of write towards the positive outcome instead of away from the negative. So just continuing on delivering bad news in professional email or saying no, after finding common ground with your reader, you want to proceed to explain the situation step by step. And oftentimes the reader will will understand the no conclusion or the bad news conclusion before you even say it, because you're kind of logically going through the situation to the point where that the reader understands why the answer is no, or why you are delivering bad news. And the right type of no email is one way to salvage goodwill in the professional situation. So yes, you are perhaps delivering news that the person on the receiving end of the email doesn't want to hear. But if you kind of phrase yourself or go about it in the right way, you can still maintain a collegial, ideally collegial relationship with the person to whom you're corresponding. Because no does happen. People get no answers and people hear bad news. But you can definitely say it, express it in a way that's most advantageous to you professionally. So an example of putting a good spin on bad news, so kind of writing towards a positive outcome as opposed to away from a negative. So there are two possible ways of phrasing the same sentiment. So you can say, the way my schedule looks, I'll be unable to complete the invoice in 1 week. Or you can say, in 2 weeks' time, I'll have the invoice ready with the specific details you need. So we see while the first option writes towards a negative outcome, or writes away from the negative outcome, the second option writes towards the positive one. So they're both expressing the same message, but they are doing it. One is doing it in a way that's probably, better for you professionally. That's the second option. And the first option is a little bit less advantageous. And, if you've written a professional email before, you might have found yourself naturally kind of and applying these tactics to your professional writing when you're writing emails. I know that I have, just in the sense of like when you're writing to someone, you really want to try to please them in a professional context. I mean, the purpose of a professional email is to have a good professional communication. So if you just think about writing the email as you want to kind of ideally please the person on the receiving end at any way you can, you might find yourself naturally kind of turning to putting a good spin on bad news. So another option that you might find when you're writing professional emails is you might be saying maybe. So often in these types of letters, the person to whom you write in the maybe situations will have to be persuaded. Frequently, you'll have to enlist support for your product or your position or whatever it is you need to perhaps persuade this, maybe person about. So questions to ask: what's in it for her or him, the person you are seeking to persuade? Can you make him or her want to go along with you? In the matter of persuasion, you have plenty of room to experiment and use creativity and intuition. The bottom line about professional correspondence is in business, business cares about the person on the receiving end of the letter or email. It's important to kind of maintain a certain sense of goodwill, express courtesy. These are all, express in general, you definitely just want to be aware of who you're writing to and make them think by the way that you're writing to them that you genuinely care about their interest and that you are just a general awareness of your reader. It's really central. So one way to do this is to kind of imagine who you're addressing as you're writing and as you consider the most appropriate way to correspond with them. So you might think, how would they like to be addressed? What levels of formality are appropriate? And what do I need to mention to interest this reader? I cannot tell you how many times working as a college professor I have received emails without like a "Dear Miss Saunders." And of course, in college, it's not as important, but if I were to receive an email without kind of a signature and a dear so and so in a professional context, I would probably think less of the person who wrote that. So it's just important to follow the little rules of formality in correspondence to make sure that you are giving the person on the receiving end of the email the kind of care and attention they deserve. I think an important thing is also just to mention things that you think will interest that reader. So you maybe take a second and think about what will they care about? What are their priorities? How can I write this in a way that's most intriguing to them? Levels of formality are definitely inappropriate, and definitely think about the name that it was most appropriate for them to be called. I usually start writing emails with calling like either their full names, so like it would be Dear Vanessa Saunders, and of course if the person responds back and signs their email Vanessa, I know that I can probably use Dear Vanessa from now on. But or maybe Dr. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so. You'll have to think each time, and each situation that you write in is unique. So a little bit of thought goes into, putting all these little details in, and it sounds like they might be trivial, but actually all the little details kind of contribute to an overall whole. And you definitely want to give, I think using language in professional settings is definitely like a professional signature that you have. And the more polished and perfect your professional signature, the better that you seem as an employee. So, thing or employer or whatever your position is. Okay, so things to remember. You want to motivate your readers to act, right? So you want to say things that they want to hear or that inspire them to take a certain action. And it's as with every situation that you write in, you're always think about who you're writing to, what they might want to hear, and what might inspire them to act. You want to remain courteous and diplomatic. You want to, say thank you for the right things, say please for the right things, express gratitude. I think that's kind of an underlooked aspect of professional correspondence is say thank you for putting this time in, because everyone's putting time in, and you don't need to go into a lot of detail, but you need to express like the basic courtesy, and that's again being aware of who you're writing to and what they're putting in on your behalf. You definitely want to accept responsibility for any mistakes you've made. Not in a way that you are disparaging yourself, but that you acknowledge the wrongs done, because things do happen, but that doesn't mean that you can't move forward in the professional relationship. You want to keep your language simple, personal, direct, and you definitely want to try to pad bad news with good news if possible. So again, just in terms of delivering bad news, you want to write towards the good situation as opposed to writing away from the negative one. But you also want to, if you're delivering, a piece of bad news, you want to insert kind of, if you think about it as like a paragraph, there's the paragraph sandwich. I learned this in third grade. You have the topic sentence and the conclusive sentence. Think about putting the bad news in the kind of the middle of the paragraph sandwich. So that would be the meat, the metaphorical meat, and the bread, the good news would be on either side. Just in terms of, not allowing the situation to appear as overly negative. And, when you are communicating the negative facts, be direct, be apologetic and understanding, but you don't have to kind of grovel or overly apologize, because that really won't change the reality of the situation. You can acknowledge the wrong done and just move forward. So another thing in talking about the little details that are important in professional correspondence, you definitely want to proofread every letter or email that you send, and you want to do that several times. And you want to invest time into the aesthetic presentation of your text, and you want to kind of think of this as all part of your professional signature. I know that it can feel tedious and boring, but to the person who's reading it, they're experiencing the text in a different way than you are when you're writing it. So these little things that are wrong, they're going to really stick out, and they're going to give the reader an impression of you. So, just as an example, so on typos of presentation, so does this type of presentation look professional? So we see some typos in the first line, we see a random kind of bullet, and then we see professional is capitalized. So the answer is no, it doesn't look professional to see text like that. And you wouldn't want like a little mistake like that to allow the reader to have a bad opinion of you as a professional. So, in the writing that you turn in this class, it should really be is just a way to get you used to the type of standards that are expected in professional writing. You should really be proofreading things several times, read it out loud to yourself, try whatever strategies you can to produce writing that's clean and error-free, and it's very important. All right, so thanks for listening to this week 4 content, and I hope some of this is useful for you as you craft your professional language in this class.